someone is preparing to leave your life. Not loudly, not with a confrontation or a final conversation or any of the visible, definitive markers that people imagine when they think about the ending of a connection. Not with the kind of closure that lets you file something neatly and move forward with a clear understanding of what happened and why. Quietly, the way certain people leave, by degree, by reducing their presence incrementally until the absence feels like something that happened gradually rather than something that was decided. By pulling back the warmth first, then the availability, then the attention, in a sequence so carefully paced that by the time the departure is complete, it has the texture of something that simply faded rather than something that was chosen. But it was chosen, and the choosing has already happened. What has not happened yet is the executing of it, the full physical, logistical withdrawal from your world that completes the decision that was made somewhere in the private interior of this person's life without your knowledge and without your participation and without anyone asking whether you were prepared for it. You are not prepared for it, and I need to make sure you have what you need before it happens. Stay with me, because what came through when I sat with your energy today is not comfortable. But comfort is not what this moment requires. What this moment requires is clarity. And clarity is what I am going to give you in full, without softening what needs to be said or rushing past what needs to be felt. You deserve to know this before it arrives. Let me tell you how I know. Not in the mystical sense, though the reading itself came through with the specific quality of urgency that arrives when something is close rather than distant, when the window for preparation is real, but not indefinitely open, in a more observable sense, in the sense of what I feel in this person's energy and what that energy is doing that tells me the decision has been made and the movement toward its execution is already underway. There is a withdrawal happening that is not yet visible to you, the kind that starts internally, before behavior changes, before availability shifts, before any of the outward signs that someone is leaving become legible. There is an interior movement, a turning of attention away from a connection towards something else, a redirecting of emotional investment from what was toward what comes next. A quiet, private, sometimes painful, sometimes almost clinical process of detachment that a person undertakes before the detachment becomes visible to the person they are detaching from. This person is in that process right now. And the reason you cannot fully see it yet is because it is happening in the layer of their life that exists beneath what they show you. In the part that is doing the real work of preparation, while the surface of your interactions continues in whatever form it currently takes, the conversations are still happening. The contact is still present. But underneath them, something has shifted in the quality of their investment that is not yet translating into visible behavior. It will, I want to speak to what is driving the interior withdrawal before it becomes an exterior one, because this person did not arrive at this decision overnight. What I feel when I sit with their energy is not a sudden change of direction. It is the end of a long, private, back and forth negotiation they have been having with themselves about a question they could not resolve until recently. The question was whether to stay, and the negotiation looked like this. There were moments where they leaned towards staying, where the warmth of what exists in your connection and the specific quality of who you are to them made the idea of leaving feel like a loss they were not prepared to absorb, where they told themselves that what they had here was worth holding on to, worth working through whatever made staying complicated. And then there were the other moments, the ones where the pull in a different direction was stronger, where the reasons to leave, which are not about you but are about something in them that requires a different kind of life than the one they have been living, became louder than the reasons to stay. The other moments won, not in a single decisive flash of clarity, in the slow, cumulative way that long negotiations end when one side finally runs out of arguments. The case for staying became harder to make. The case for leaving became harder to ignore. And somewhere recently, in a moment that had no particular drama to mark it, the verdict landed. They are going. I want to speak to why, not to excuse it, but because understanding the reason is going to give you something critical, the ability to see what is actually happening rather than the version of it that your instinct left without context will be most likely to construct. This disappearance is not about your worth. I need to say that first, and I need to say it clearly, because the specific kind of grief that comes from someone choosing to leave your life has a way of converting itself in the mind of the person being left into evidence of inadequacy, into proof that something about you was not enough, or was too much, or failed to hold what you needed it to hold. That conversion is incorrect. The reason this person is preparing to leave has its roots in something that belongs entirely to them, a decision about their own life and their own direction and their own relationship to what they have been building or avoiding or running from that predates you and would have reached this point regardless of who you were or what you offered or how completely you showed up in this connection. You were not the problem. You were, in fact, the best part of something they have decided to walk away from for reasons that are complicated and not entirely conscious, and that they themselves could not fully articulate if asked to do so honestly. The departure is about them. The grief it leaves behind will be yours. Let me describe what the disappearance is going to look like in its early stages. Because the warning I want to give you is not just that it is coming, it is specific enough to be useful. Specific enough that when the behavior begins, you will recognize it for what it is, rather than finding yourself in the confusion of interpreting each individual signal without the context of the whole. The first sign is a change in response time, not dramatic, not the sudden, obvious shift from immediate replies to days of silence that anyone would recognize as significant. Something subtler, a few extra hours where there used not to be extra hours. A slightly longer pause before engagement that was previously prompt. A quality in the replies themselves, when they come, of something slightly more surface than what the exchange between you used to hold. More functional, less present, technically responsive, but missing something in the texture of its attention. You will notice this. You notice everything, but you may talk yourself out of the noticing because each individual instance will have a plausible explanation, and plausible explanations are what intelligent people reach for when the alternative explanation is something they are not ready to consider. The second sign is a narrowing of what gets shared. This person, in whatever way they have been present in your life, will begin to offer you less of the interior. The conversations will continue, but they will become more external in their content. more about events and logistics and the surface of their life and less about the underneath of it. They will stop bringing you the things that require them to be vulnerable with you because vulnerability requires investment in the connection, and their investment is quietly, privately being redirected. The third sign is the one that will be hardest to ignore. Even when you try, the energy will change. Not the words, the energy underneath the words. The specific quality of presence that has characterized whatever this person has been to you, that warmth, that particular attention, that way they had of making you feel that you were where their awareness actually was when they were engaging with you will become slightly more ambient, more like the performance of presence than presence itself. And you, who are exquisitely sensitive to the difference between those two things, are going to feel it long before you can point to anything specific that explains what changed. And I want to pause here because something is coming through for a specific portion of you watching this, and I cannot move past it without addressing it. For some of you, the person who is about to disappear is not someone you thought of as central. They occupy a role in your life that perhaps you have even taken somewhat for granted, not in a careless way, but in the natural way that consistent presences become part of the assumed landscape of your daily life without you consciously registering how much of the texture of that life they are responsible for. When they go, the gap they leave is going to be larger than you expected. And part of the difficulty of that gap is going to be the realization that you did not fully know how much they mattered until the mattering was made visible by its absence. That is one of the quieter cruelties of losing people who were woven into the ordinary. You cannot fully inventory their contribution while they are still there. For others, the person who is about to disappear is someone you have been watching with concern for a while, someone whose investment in the connection you were already sensing had a different quality than it once did. For you, this reading is less a warning than a confirmation. The discomfort you have been carrying about this person and this connection was accurate. Your instincts were right. And knowing that, as painful as the confirmation is, gives you something more useful than the uncertainty you have been living in. And for others still, this disappearance is going to feel like one of the more significant losses you have navigated in recent memory, because this is someone who has been genuinely important, who has occupied real estate in your interior life, whose presence meant something that you will find it difficult to immediately replace with anything that fits the same space in the same way. For all of you, the preparation I am trying to offer is the same. Know that it is coming, and let that knowing protect you from the specific additional wound of being caught completely off guard. Does this feel like something you have already been circling without being able to name it? Have you felt a change in someone's energy before this reading put language to what you were feeling? Have you had that experience recently of looking at a connection and sensing something slightly different without being able to identify what shifted? Leave me a comment below. Tell me what you have been sensing. Tell me which relationship this landed in for you the moment I started describing it. Now, I want to speak to the hardest part of this reading, the part that I have been building toward and that I want to deliver with the full care it requires. You cannot stop this disappearance. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I say anything else, because the instinct when someone warns you that something is coming is to ask what you can do to prevent it, to reach for the action that changes the outcome, to apply the considerable intelligence and intention and care that you are capable of bringing to a situation toward the problem of keeping this person in your life. And I am asking you to resist that instinct. Not because nothing you do can influence what happens, influence and prevention are different things, but because the effort to hold someone in a connection they have already internally decided to leave is one of the most costly things a person can spend themselves on. It costs your dignity, it costs your energy, it costs the attention that could be going toward the people and situations in your life that are moving toward you rather than away. And it almost never produces the outcome you are reaching for, because the decision to leave that has already been made internally does not respond to external pressure the way we want it to. It tends to accelerate. Let them go. I know those three words are not simple. I know they contain multitudes of grief and resistance and the specific human unwillingness to accept that something you value is moving beyond your reach. I am not asking you to let them go without feeling what that costs. I am asking you to let them go without spending yourself in the attempt to reverse something that is not yours to reverse. Their leaving is their choice. Your life is yours. Inhale. Because here is what I also need you to know. What the reading gave me alongside the warning, the part that is not easy, but that is, I believe, the most important thing in everything I have said so far. This disappearance is making room not as a platitude, not as the kind of consolation that people offer when they do not know what else to say and reaching for meaning feels better than sitting in the difficulty of meaninglessness, but as a structural fact about what happens when a space in your life that has been occupied by something that was no longer serving its highest purpose becomes available. Nature does not tolerate empty space. Neither do human lives. The room that this person's departure creates is going to be filled, not immediately, not without the grief of the transition, but filled by something or someone that could not fully arrive while the space was occupied by what was already there. There is something waiting. I feel it in your energy as clearly as I feel the departure, as clearly as I feel the warning I was given to deliver. On the other side of this loss, which is real, and this grief, which is legitimate, something is waiting that is more aligned with who you currently are than what is about to leave, more capable of meeting you at the depth you actually operate from, more deserving of the specific, extraordinary quality of presence that you bring to the connections you invest in. The departure is not the end of the story. It is the clearing of space for the part of the story that comes next. I want to speak to who you will be through this, because it matters. The version of you that navigates this disappearance with the dignity I know you are capable of, that does not chase, does not collapse, does not diminish itself in the attempt to prevent what cannot be prevented. That version of you is the one that what is waiting for. The grief is allowed, it is necessary. Let it move through you at whatever pace it moves, without trying to convert it into strength before it has finished being grief. Virgo, you have a habit of processing difficulty internally and presenting composure to the world before the processing is complete. This is not a moment for that habit. This is a moment to let the difficulty be visible to the people who love you, to let yourself be held in what you are carrying rather than carrying it entirely alone. You do not have to manage this one by yourself. The people who are genuinely in your corner, not the one who is leaving, but the ones who are staying, want to be present for this. Let them. As I close this reading, I want to leave you with the thing I feel belongs specifically to this moment and no other. You were warned because you deserve to be warned. Not everyone gets to know what is coming. Not everyone has access to the kind of preparation that transforms an ambush into something navigable. The fact that this came through for you today with this urgency and this specificity means something. It means you are being given a gift that is disguised as difficult news. Use it not to fight what is coming, but to be ready for it, to stand in it when it arrives with your feet already planted rather than scrambling to find your footing after the ground has shifted, to grieve cleanly rather than confusedly, to know from the very first moment of the loss that the loss is not a verdict on your worth. It is a transition. And transitions, even the painful ones, always lead somewhere. Yours leads somewhere good. I feel that with the same certainty I felt the warning. Both are true at the same time. Leave me a comment below. Tell me what you are feeling as you sit with this. Tell me who you thought of. Tell me whether this reading gave you something you needed, even though it was not easy to receive. I read every word, every single one. Until next time, Virgo, someone is leaving. But here is what is also true and what I need you to hold alongside the difficult part. Something is coming, and it could not find its way to you until this space was free.